Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's Full Press NFL Sunday on an actual Sunday. That's right. It feels like this is the first time we've actually been live on a Sunday in weeks. Obviously, primarily due to all the playoff games coming on Saturday and kind of the funky schedule over the last month of the season. But we are here on the last Sunday before Super Bowl 57, which will be played between the Chiefs and the Eagles. And quite frankly, Braden, I'm not going to lie. I mean, maybe it's different. Obviously, it's probably different where you're from, but I feel like there hasn't been that much hype for this game yet. I feel like it just just hasn't happened. Now, it could start happening this week. We're 7 days away, and that's usually what happens. But I don't know. It seems pretty quiet on this end.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is maybe just the rosters for the most part. You got a lot of inexperienced guys that
Mhm.
haven't been there for the most part. I mean, the Chiefs, I think I want to say there's only 6, 7 guys at the most that was part of that Super Bowl winning team from a few years ago. So maybe that's part of it. Even these players I saw a couple on Kansas City still kind of not really sure that it's real that they're in the Super Bowl
Mhm.
yet. So I think once we get into this week, you see the media night. I think tomorrow night on Monday, and then all these shows that are there at Super Bowl row. I think it'll start to feel a little bit more real that we're finally here.
Yeah, and look, I mean, obviously, there's also a couple reasons why maybe the week before the Super Bowl is going to take a backseat. One, the Sean Payton drama is over. He's going to head to Denver, but most importantly, and probably for my personal opinion, the most sad news of the week is obviously the second and I believe to be final retirement for Mr. Tom Brady, and it came 1 year after his first one, and I think there was a lot of speculation, obviously, and hope, at least on my part, that he would continue his career. Maybe another year or two, possibly with a team like San Francisco, where I think he'd be very nicely set up to succeed and possibly win an eighth Super Bowl. But he ultimately decided that this was the right time to walk away. And look, I mean, at age 45, I mean, he's been, uh, you know, I don't want to say borrowed time, but that's kind of the equivalent of it in terms of football sense. Like, most quarterbacks' effectiveness tends to wane in their late 30s, and certainly not, it's not going to stick around after 40. Tom Brady forged a Hall of Fame career after he turned 40. He won 3 Super Bowls, went to 4 after he turned 40. It's look, I know, week to week, every season, everyone is so into quarterback debates. Who's the best right now? Who's doing things that have never been done before? The reality of it is, and as great as I think someone like Patrick Mahomes is, and some of the young players we have in this league, and some of the other players that are, towards the end of their careers, like Aaron Rodgers, and players that have retired recently, like Peyton Manning. Uh, you're never going to see someone like Tom Brady in the sport again. And it's not a look, I'm trying to preserve his legacy type of thing. No, that I don't need to do any of that. His legacy is going to be fine. Um, it's how much he's lapped the field in just a lot of the things that really matter in football, and that's winning. And again, it isn't just about winning, because look, he's at the top of just about every positive quarterback statistic there is, if not at the very top, and that's something that's going to last even for a very long time, even for a guy like Patrick Mahomes and some of these younger quarterbacks who are playing in a more pass happy era. That just the sheer amount that they're going to have to accomplish. I think the number is Patrick Mahomes would have to essentially maintain the same exact pace he's on right now for the next 16 years, just to match the numbers. And that's including an extra game. So
Mhm.
as much as it seems like it's gonna, these numbers are going to be shattered, um, his records are going to last for a very long time, just by virtue of the fact that it's going to take a long time for even a guy like Patrick Mahomes to even approach those numbers, let alone anyone else. Uh, it's it's definitely, like I said, if you love football, regardless of whether or not you're a fan of the team Brady was playing on, it's a sad day because, again, anytime a great player, it was sad when Peyton Manning walked away. It was sad when some of these other great players walked away. It's certainly sad to see a guy like Tom Brady walk away. Who, I mean, you're going to be very hard pressed to find an argument that you can make to, well, calling him the greatest player in NFL history is certainly far more subjective because there's so many other variables. But you're going to be hard pressed to have a legitimate argument to say why he isn't the greatest quarterback of all time. And it's not about just championships. It's not about numbers. It's about everything. And on top of everything, it's 23 years, and I kid you not, short of Antonio Brown. And again, that's a discussion for another day. I don't think there's ever been a negative thing said about him, and I'm not exaggerating. Like if you can scour the internet all you want, and not a former teammate, coach has ever publicly said anything negative about the guy, and just the opposite. Most of them praise a lot of the things he does, not just on the field, obviously, but off the field, and I think that has helped forge his legacy and sort of speaks to how great of a person, not only player in the sport of football is, but a person in the society. And a lot of stories from former teammates came out this week, kind of emphasizing that. But at the end of the day, you're talking about the greatest quarterback to ever step foot on a football field, the guy that dominated the sport like no one has ever done, and I really doubt that someone's going to do it to that level again, for as long as he did. And again, longevity is part of the equation here. Longevity is part of why he is great. It's not the sole reason. And again, there's so many reasons why. It's just that's part of it. And I think like I said, I'm sad that he's not continuing. I understand why he's hanging it up, and I can tell you that my life on Sundays moving forward are going to be a whole hell of a lot different. I'm going to have to go back to before I was 14 years old to really remember a time without watching Tom Brady on Sunday, and that's like I said, that's going to take a little bit to change. But yeah, I mean, just unbelievable career, unbelievable person, and it's unfortunate that he's walking away. But what else does he have to accomplish?
It's when you talk about the longevity part of it, I think that's what really stands out to me is just his competitive nature and just his focus on being the best. I think every day for that long, it's something that it's so hard to do. I think day in and day out, especially when you talk about just the grind that football is, the kind of sport it is, regardless of play style at the quarterback position. So I think that's something that's pretty, just looking back on it all these years, something that's really, I think, stood out to a lot of people these last few days. And you just talk about, I just think his accomplishments. I mean, part of the reason why I think I grew to appreciate Brady so much was, other than Peyton Manning, being kind of how young I am, I didn't get to see guys like Dan Marino, Joe Montana. So I kind of always appreciated kind of being able to kind of see one of these last living legends, so to speak, especially in a sport like football and a position like quarterback. So to see what he did, I mean, we talked about, I think off the air before we started, every 7 seasons. He basically had a Hall of Fame career in three different spans of his career. So I think just kind of that's where I really have started to appreciate his greatness the last handful of years, was just because I've I didn't grow up getting to see a lot of those earlier greatest quarterbacks in kind of the 80s and 90s. So just kind of being able to witness that, I think, is what was so special for me. And part of the reason why I love football kind of more than any other sport.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the thing about it too is he can still play. This isn't Peyton Manning at the end of his career where it just for many reasons. Obviously, Peyton had the really bad neck injury, which attributed to his kind of fall from grace, so to speak. Look, Tom Brady could still throw the ball. He could still go out there and play at 46. And maybe had he walked away last year, where I think look, he was voted the league's best player coming into the season, and deservedly so. I mean, he was phenomenal last year. I said it at the time. I'll say it until I'm dead. I think he deserved to win the MVP, and
Right.
I thought he was by far the best player last season. Now, this season was a bit of a struggle, and I think that surely had a role in it. I mean, there's so many things going on in his life outside of football that I'm sure contributed to the rough season. But the bottom line is he could still sling the ball if he had to. So that's what's something that you're always gonna. It's incredible that you're gonna say what if with a 45-year-old, but like you kind of said what if he kept playing, like he might still be able to add to his already over 100,000 yards passing in both the regular and postseason combined, which again these are numbers that, like I said, I mean, like right now, obviously, you look at Patrick Mahomes, number one to get to all these different benchmarks when it comes to passing and everything like that. And look, part of it is obviously him. There's no doubt about it. Part of it is the rules in which the football's played now. It's a little bit more open for offenses. That's not a bad thing. I mean, that's what we want to see. And it's just because that happens doesn't mean you're going to produce. I mean, there's no guarantee, but it surely gives them more opportunity. So even with all those factors, like I said earlier, I think it's about 15 or 16 years in addition to what we've already seen, where Patrick Mahomes will have to maintain the same level of production. And that's something that's definitely not guaranteed. And it kind of puts into perspective just how much and what Brady has done over those 23 years. And you look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who does rely more on his legs than obviously Brady does.
Mhm.
And you sit there and say, well, you're going to be hard pressed to bank on a quarterback like that being that effective that late in his career, later 30s into his 40s. Doesn't mean he's not going to have an excellent career up until that point, but you got to figure the legs are always the first thing to go. Well, Brady used his legs the way a pocket quarterback does. He didn't have to run, so that didn't really matter so much for him. So, all those factors, bottom line, best case scenario, it's going to be 15 years before Brady's numbers are even talked about as being passed. So, that's something that obviously Dan Marino spent a significant amount of time at the top of, I don't want to say significant amount of time because Brett Favre obviously passed him in the mid 90s or later 90s, but there's going to be more time that Brady's likely going to hold those records because right now no one's close. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, he's obviously not going to touch those numbers and certainly doesn't have enough time to do so. Like I said, it's going to take Patrick Mahomes, the only other viable candidate at this point. It's going to take Patrick Mahomes at least another 15 years to even come close to those numbers. So,
Right.
yeah. And then you talk about the Super Bowl wins, which are more than any franchise. And the previous greatest quarterback of all time, the previous record holder for most wins, has been more than doubled. Joe Montana was 16. Tom Brady ends his career with 35, which, again, these numbers are astronomical when you really step back and look at them. And I know someone threw out the idea of retiring the number or doing something along those lines. And look, I certainly wouldn't be against it because, more so from a personal matter, but I don't think it's going to happen. And I actually probably don't really think that's the best way. And my response to that, and I'd like to hear what you think. And I think this is something that probably should have been done yesterday. I think they need to name the Super Bowl MVP trophy after him. It's that has no name right now. It if there's anything that would encompass who Tom Brady was as a performer and as a player in this league, it's the Super Bowl MVP, of which he has 5 of them, which is obviously a record because no other quarterback even has 4 wins, let alone 4 MVP trophies. But it also kind of, I think it also involves the bigger picture and just kind of, his, when you think about Tom Brady in terms of being on the football field, it's you always have a chance, whether you're down 10, whether you're down 25, whether you're down, 8 and with a minute and a half left, whether you need that 2-point conversion, well, he's going to get it. Well, if you need him to go 15 to 16 against the Seattle Seahawks, one of the best defenses of the era in the Super Bowl, well, he's going to do it and he's going to throw 2 touchdowns. Do you need 2 touchdowns and 2-point conversions against Atlanta? Well, guess what? Doesn't matter that he threw a pick six earlier. He's going to do it. And I think that is really what, you can boil down his career too. So I think that would be a great way to honor. Like I said, this isn't great players come and go all the time, and I'm not trying to diminish or elevate Tom so far above some of these other great players. But the reality of it is there is a separate pedestal for this guy because of what he's accomplished and the bars that he has set. And I think the best way to honor that, like I said, is to rename the Super Bowl MVP trophy after him.
For sure, yeah. I think especially because, like you said, it's not just that I think he's done it more than anybody. He's just made it look so easy. I think in the biggest of stages. I mean, thinking about how many 2 minute drills, he's just been able to make the perfect decision every single time. So I would agree with you there. And I think the crazy thing too, looking back at his numbers probably not being matched with the Super Bowls, is they went, what was it, 10 years I think in New England without winning
Yep.
one. And some of the greatest teams that the Patriots had, never won one, with Randy Moss, or um, some of the years they had at least 14 wins, I believe it was. So that's kind of the crazy thing too, when you're looking back at his Super Bowl wins and how many that he was able to accomplish.
And the crazy thing about it is, in those 3 losses, and all 3 losses, he gave the Patriots a lead late in the final couple minutes of those games. Super Bowl 42, 90 seconds, touchdown pass to Randy Moss. And I know we poke fun at incomplete, I have agendas that I have to push. So sometimes I poke fun at incomplete passes, especially when they're kind of over the top praise. But you want to talk about, great almost passes. Um, so end of Super Bowl 42, Tom Brady launches the ball about 70 yards across the field, pinpoint accuracy. And Randy Moss later said that he's the one who screwed up. He should have jumped. He jumps. That game's going to, at the very least, overtime because they're in field goal range. And if you watch that pass, it doesn't even seem like Brady got everything into it. It was so effortless. And it went from hash mark to essentially outside the opposite hash mark, about 70 yards in the air. And again, go back to Super Bowl 46 and Rob Gronkowski, had he not stuttered for 1 second, that deflected Hail Mary pass would have landed in the palm in his big mitts. And you're talking about one of the, I mean, forget about Aaron Rodgers Hail Marys. We would have never heard about that. It would have been, Tom Brady once again throwing that deep pass. But regardless, even before those almost plays, they had leads late in those games. And unfortunately, and I'm not trying to sit here and say, oh, the defense blew it. No, I mean, they didn't, their entire team didn't play well enough, and give credit to the Giants, especially, who really, played. I mean, maybe you can blame Super Bowl 52 on the defense, considering Tom Brady threw for 500 yards and,
Mm.
they didn't force a single punt that whole game. So, but certainly against the Giants, it wasn't clean games, but at the end of the day, they were ahead late in the game, and a couple plays here and there. And I know you can do this for a lot of Super Bowls, but maybe there's a couple more in there. But at the end of the day, 7 is more than any franchise. It's nearly double what Joe Montana had. He's gone to twice as many Super Bowls as any other player, and John Elway obviously is second with 5. So yeah, just a career you're never going to see again. So all right, enough about Tom Brady. I could talk about Tom Brady all day. Unfortunately, this is not the Tom Brady show. We'll do that at another time. Everything was happening last week. I missed a couple episodes of our FPC Radio Live show during the week because I was out of town. So, with the Tom Brady retirement, with the Super Bowl coming up, I haven't even talked about Sean Payton yet. And except for that little mention of him in the opener of this show, we haven't really got to him as, his, I guess, anticlimactic sort of, finish to the Sean Payton saga. Like, I think we were building ourselves up for this to be really just something that was constantly going to be in the news, and then it just kind of happened. and he went to Denver. So obviously, the first thing you think, well, he has to believe that Russell Wilson is fixable, meaning he's not the player he was last year. And look, Sean Payton isn't desperate enough to just take whatever situation he wanted. He could have picked his. He had his choice of jobs. I'm sure there was other teams that were interested. There clearly were, and if he really wanted to, he could have taken another year off and found a better situation. So, my first impression is he sees something that he can fix in Russell Wilson. There's no doubt about it, because you're not taking that job knowing you're going to be saddled with a guy for the next 5 years, essentially. And yeah, that's just not going to happen. So my first instinct was, well, he thinks he can fix Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and I guess kind of looking back at how him and Drew Brees kind of combination started in New Orleans, it was a gamble that he took there. So I think it's similar in a sense, where it may not be a immediate fix, but I think knowing how long Wilson's locked up in that contract in Denver, it's something that I think he knows he can kind of fix some of the other holes, because this is a team that still has to fix the offensive line. I think this offseason they still have some really good receivers, just looking to stay healthy there. So I think you got at least some pieces in play early. And if you look back at his Saints run, I think he had 3 straight 7 and 9 years with Drew Brees. So I think he knows, I think, how to kind of manage in short windows. I think he's really good at kind of rolling with the current trends that the league is kind of usually heading to. So I think that's some good signs that Denver can point to. I think I was just mostly shocked out of all the jobs. This is the one he took, especially knowing Mahomes and Herbert are in that division. I think two quarterbacks that I think in different timelines he was close to having on his team. I know he was really close to drafting Mahomes with that 11th pick, 2017, and it just seemed like if they would have moved on from Staley, it almost would have been a shoe in that he would have had Herbert in Los Angeles. So I know it's kind of reported Arizona was interested. I don't know how much truth to it there is, but I think something with just kind of the lack of kind of stability and just newness in that facility, I think was something that apparently must have turned him off from there, according to some of the reports. So outside of that, I think you just after that, I was kind of thinking he might just wait till next year to take a job. He's been really high on USC quarterback Caleb Williams, who could very well be the next number one quarterback, I guess, in 2024. So I was thinking he might just kind of try to wait and take a job that has him in line to kind of take that top quarterback. But eventually, I think this is a Denver team that, despite their recent history, they've always kind of been really competitive. So I think it's kind of the perfect guy for Denver to kind of zero in on here, and hopes to really turn it around.
Yeah, and look, I mean, if you're comparing, quality of jobs, I'd say the Denver job was much better than Arizona. One, you know, I'm not a big fan of Kyler Murray. I think he's fun to watch, but obviously coming off the injury, that's going to be a big issue. But also, I can't see how in a league where players are so big and so fast that someone in his position as a quarterback who runs like he does is going to last and be consistently healthy in this league. I maybe that's fair, maybe that's unfair. I don't know, but it just doesn't. It doesn't. I don't see it being a consistent thing where he's going to be out there for 17 games a season and healthy and all that. So, and at the very least, at least with Russell Wilson, if it fails, he's older and you can't, there's certain, I guess you can move. I don't know. It's, in my opinion, they're not certainly great situations, but then again, how many great situations for coaches are open?
Right.
Most great situations are occupied. So, but when it comes to picking and choosing one or the other, I definitely think Denver was the better situation. And, lost in a lot of this was they actually had a pretty good defense last year. And it
Right.
was the reason why they were kind of actually in some games they just could never score enough to actually win those games. So yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm not watching Russell Wilson every day. I don't know, um, what he's doing, rehabbing or what his ailments are or anything like that. I'm just basing it on, well, probably kind of a long history of not being the biggest Russell Wilson fan, or at least not as high on him as some others would be. But I just saw a guy that, again, was whether he was injured or just, I mean, he looked a lot like he did in the second half of last season, and that wasn't that good at all. So, well, good for Sean Payton. I mean, if he goes out and wins with this version of the Broncos again in that division, like you said, good for him. And that would be pretty impressive. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach this offseason and kind of, we'll see how big of an influence. And obviously, he's going to have a huge influence, but how big of an influence Sean Payton's going to have right away, like how he's going to shape that team, and who is he going to bring in, and how is he going to approach? Well, I don't know what they have for draft capital, but how are they going to approach the draft and all that? So, all right. So, like I said, I mean, we're 7 days away from the Super Bowl, and that means, well, we really got nothing to talk about because nothing has happened, and there's no changes really. So very briefly, I just want to kind of get, you live near Kansas City. Obviously, you follow the Chiefs. You know the team. You've been following the team for a very long time. You're rooting for the team. Give us just the feel of this game going in, not only from a Chiefs perspective, but maybe from, taking a look from the Eagles side of things.
Yeah, I guess from the Chiefs' perspective, it's the injuries. I think is what immediately stands out when you kind of look at the last time they were in the Super Bowl. The offensive line being banged up. I think given it's the Super Bowl, I'm sure these guys are going to be fine by next Sunday. I know the team kind of listed estimated game statuses if there were a game this week. It looks like McCole Hardman is going to be the one that probably is most doubtful. So possibly not going to see him in a Chiefs uniform ever again, unless he's able to kind of, settle for probably a cheaper deal to come back. I think Kadarius Toney's probably taking his role for the future. So I think the injuries is something that's going to be talked about a lot from the Chiefs side of things. But really, it's just I think the chance to win another one for Andy Reid. I kind of wrote an article for Friday, just how he can really cement his status. I think is one of the best coaches of all time with that second Super Bowl win. When you look at just, I think he had 140 wins, including the playoffs with the Eagles. And if he wins the Super Bowl, he'll tie Hank Stram for most in Chiefs history already, just 10 years in. So I think with that second Super Bowl win, and you look at just how much the players love to play for him, the admiration that they have for him, I think that's the biggest thing that stands out from the Chiefs side of things, especially given they're playing his old team, and really from the Eagles side of things. I think it's just this is kind of one of those teams that I think is really kind of wearing that hat of diving into this new age style of how some people think about football with the analytics, and just kind of how they approach short yardage situations, fourth downs on offense. So I think if they're able to get it done, I think some of those analytic based ideas will maybe make those analytic people feel really good. And I think Nick Sirianni, kind of looking back at his introductory press conference, it'll just be really interesting to see him get it done in his second season if Philly were to win, and obviously just kind of the mantra that he has and the attitude that he has is just, I think, perfect for that Philadelphia city and that style of play that they have.
Yeah, and it's funny. I saw it yesterday, and I can't remember which player said it, but he basically called Nick Sirianni a system coach, which that's a new one for me. We hear system quarterback all the time, but he said pretty much anyone could be winning with the Eagles team, and I again, you can't dismiss what his impact on this team, and kind of, we'll see it hopefully in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. I'll ask you this right before I start having this coughing fit that I'm trying to hold off. What's the biggest issue on the Chiefs defense when it comes to facing the Eagles, or what's the biggest concern rather?
Yeah, I think the biggest concern is probably going to be the defending the Eagles' run game, and I think it's just you look at the linebackers for the Chiefs, especially Nick Bolton, as much as he does well. I think running downhill and plugging gaps. I think there's going to be some concern for him out in space if the Eagles are really able to get to those outside edges, and I think Willie Gay is a guy sometimes you have a little bit of hold your breath moments when it comes to if he's going to be able to make those tackles in space. So I think that's the biggest concern is the run game, and just seeing what kind of wrinkles Kansas City's going to try to bring out when you're talking about the RPO game, and just I think the speed that Philadelphia has. We saw San Francisco kind of hesitate a lot, really trying to read that mesh point. So I think I think I said this on the Packers pod with Kyle. I think if I'm Steve Spagnuolo, first and foremost, I think I'm just going to have to attempt to sell out to stop the run early on in that game, and take your chances. I think one on one in coverage, at least in the first half.
Now, I guess from a offensive perspective, if you're the Chiefs, what are you concerned about with the Eagles defense? And I guess in the same sense, if you're the Eagles defense, how are you ideally want to attack this offense?
Yeah, I think it's the most concerning thing is probably the pass rush, and especially with just the offensive tackles of Kansas City probably being the weakest links of the blocking unit. I mean, Orlando Brown Jr. I think both years with the Chiefs has probably finished the year better than he started, but very susceptible to speed rushers, and Philly has quite a bit of that. And then you look at Andrew Wiley, didn't have a great AFC Championship game, so I think we're probably going to see Jerick McKinnon have a big part in that pass blocking, and really have to kind of help out Patrick Mahomes quite a bit early on. And I think the biggest thing for the Eagles is I think I wouldn't be surprised to see them start to drop more guys into coverage. They're a defense that usually rushes four in their base defense, but just seeing a few of the wrinkles that they put out there against San Francisco, where they'll bring a safety blitz and have both linebackers kind of drop into the flats. I think they're very deceptive with kind of their zone coverage, even though they're not afraid to run man. So I think that's going to be the toughest test for the Chiefs is really just kind of finding those soft spots in coverage, and staying kind of ahead of schedule or on schedule, because this is an Eagles team that I just it's going to be hard to come back on them. I think from say a two-score deficit very early in this game.
Yeah, and something that might be concerning to some Chiefs fans is you can imagine that this Eagles team is going to attack them very similarly as to what Tampa did in Super Bowl 55 because they have a lot of the same elements, some of the similar players in the sense of Ndamukong Suh, but just kind of what you're describing, that's what Tampa did, and that's obviously was a big problem for Kansas City in that Super Bowl. But we'll see. We'll see. So, all right, that's gonna do it for us here today. Nice and easy show. Next week, obviously, we will be back to really break down all the matchups and get you ready for Super Bowl Sunday. It's going to be a fun one. Like I said, I think we're going to get a really great game. I think both of these teams are playing at a very high level coming into the game. So, yeah, it's gonna be pretty exciting to Kyle. I'm surprised he's not plugging the CFL yet. But hey, don't forget, guys. We also get the XFL coming up here soon. 3.0 is that where we're at right now? I don't know. Either way, I'll tune in. I thought they were doing something good. Let's just put it this way. I thought they were doing something good. Unfortunately, a global pandemic happened and it kind of put the end to that. But yeah, it starts in June. I'm trying here, Kyle. I'm trying. All right. But anyways, we will be back next Sunday. We're going to obviously break down the Super Bowl matchup, focus on that, and yeah, it should be fun. So everyone, enjoy your last week of the NFL season, and we'll see you next Sunday. Thank you.